It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland Retrospective here on the SPDM Crew podcasting network. This is my weekly show where my collaborator and I each pick a film that are related in some shape or form, or maybe the same film. And we talk about it, and hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll have two films to check out. And joining me for this holiday season is my buddy Luke. Luke, thank you so much for coming on.
Ho, 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 and Merry Christmas.
And I'll do my version. Oh, because I grew up watching the Santa Claus. So
Ah, makes sense.
I cannot get out of my head maniacal Tim Allen hoing when he's the plastic, like he's the toy Santa in the
Yeah.
second Santa Claus movie, who happens to be a fascist. So that's fun. That's a twist. But we're not here to talk about the Santa Claus. We're here to talk about Miracle on 34th Street and
hmm
Miracle on 34th Street. So we're going to be talking about the 1947 version and the 1994 version. One of these I liked a lot more than the other one. And
Same.
honestly, one of them, I'm just like, why they make this? But we'll get to that in a minute. Well, let's start with the 47 one from director George Seaton, starring Edmund Gwenn as Kris Kringle, also starring Maureen O'Hara, John Payne, and Natalie Wood.
The
And
baby
also,
Natalie Wood.
yep. And I would also like to point out
Mm.
when they go to the mail room and the guy sorting mail is that son of a bitch, Grandpa Joe from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
I didn't even recognize him, to be honest.
I recognized his voice a little bit, and then I kept looking at his face. I'm like, that could be a young Albertson. And I looked it up. And I'm like, it is that son of a bitch, Grandpa Joe from Willy Wonka and the
See,
Chocolate Factory. So there you go. But Luke, what are your thoughts on the film?
I I have a mixed feelings, but I really like it. And the reason I'm
Okay.
saying mixed feelings is knew nothing about this movie. Only thing I knew is kind of like a legend, like I had a legendary status, right? So I
Mhm.
was in a mood for like a nice Christmas movie I've never seen, and to get me in the Christmas spirit, right? And the
Yeah.
first like half of this movie, maybe a bit more than half, I felt that magic. The scene with the kid, with the Dutch kid.
Mm.
It was beautiful. Like, if you read on IMDb what's actually said in that sentence, you will probably cry because it's so fucking beautiful. It's just so touching. And the main performer, like, he won an Oscar for being Santa Claus, right?
Mm.
So, like, love this, right? I didn't expect this to turn into a courtroom drama, and that kind of took me out, but I have a feeling on if I were to rewatch it maybe like a year from now, I'll probably it'll go down much smoother than like
It
it
looks
went
less
down.
weird.
Yes, because I genuinely wasn't ready for that. I feel like I felt like that movie could have gone like a couple of different routes, and suddenly we were on a trial for is Santa real? And I'm like, what? That just
It's
feels
about
so weird.
trial.
And like yeah, the trial obviously like it's uplifting, all that. The ending is uplifting, all that. It just took me out a tiny bit, but I still really appreciated many things about this movie. What about you?
It's crazy. This is a three-time winning Oscar, like a three-time
Yep.
Oscar winner for Best Supporting Actor, Original Story, and Original Screenplay, which those are
Yes.
two separate Oscars at that point.
Correct. For the
And
same
this
really.
was yeah, and this was nominated for Best Picture. And I also know this from listening to the Cinephiles that this was a box office bomb because they released this in the summer.
Oh yeah, because wasn't there a marketing ploy where yeah they were like, oh, it's a Christmas movie, therefore nobody wants to see it over Christmas. Let's try May, and it used to be, and like the original title wasn't supposed to be like Christmas Miracle on 34th Street, but they removed the Christmas, so it's easier to advertise.
So dumb.
It is.
They drop this crap at Christmas. People like to go to the movies in the holidays. But
Yep.
anyway, I do love this movie quite a
hmm
bit. I think it's extremely charming. I believe Edwin Gwynn is so fantastic as Santa
Yep.
in this. He is so charming. I love his approach to the character. There's an aloofness to
Mm-hmm.
some of like the darker things in life. And we'll talk about this more when we talk about the next one. I wasn't the hugest fan of the interpretation of Santa in that one. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a particular moment in this where, like, he strikes somebody, but it
Yeah.
wasn't out of like Santa losing his cool. It was out of like basically disappointed dad, like bopping somebody on the head.
He was forced to do that because like he even says you cannot be reasoned with, like you're awful not awful, but he
Yeah.
says like you're almost like beyond any redemption, so shame on you.
What's it's like point. It
Yep.
just popped him on the head, and then he
Gets on
flopped.
trial.
He flopped harder than an NBA player. Uh, afterwards, and it's just I think Gwen's so fantastic. Maureen O'Hara, especially after watching all these John Ford films, I love
Hmm.
her. I
Yeah.
think she's great. I really enjoyed her in this. John Payne, not very familiar with, but like he did a nice job in this. Like
Yeah.
he's in the tough position of trying to be like just a nice guy, and like that's his character. So
Yes.
like having to sell that, and I thought Natalie Wood was extremely charming
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as little Susan, and the courtroom elements I like so much more in this one, and I think a big part of that is because Gene Lockhart, the judge, and
Mm-hmm.
his whole arc, he is he's so much fun to watch in this movie because like you can see it because this is an audio podcast, but like just all the facial expressions he was making, especially with Charlie O'Halloran, his advisor guy, just be
Yep.
like giving him like knowing
The
glance.
clues, like the cues, like, oh yeah, you said it correctly, or like, no, 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 no. No, like not to tip of my hand as well, but that's what I wrote in my letterbox review for the remake.
Uh-huh.
That courtroom drama worked much like I appreciated this version, the original, much more after watching a remake because I watched them back to back,
Yep.
and it's such a whiplash because there are a lot of scenes are like a word for word, like pretty much taken from the this movie. And to go back to the main actor, the Santa Claus, to Chris
Mhm.
Edmund, he has this sincerity in him,
Yes.
right? And if you read as I do, like IMDb trivia and all different kind of stuff, he apparently was just a very jolly, nice guy where they will all hang out
Mm.
through the entirety of the shooting, like after they wrapped and just walked around New York. And apparently, like everybody on that movie, including Maureen O'Hara, including that Natalie Wood, believed like he might actually be Santa because he was such a jolly, positive
Yes.
guy. Like even in Maureen O'Hara in her biopic, it was talking about how just insanely great this guy was, right? And it shines through on a screen. Like that's what I'm saying. That first 15 minutes or so, the movie convinces you there might be a magic in this world, and it's such a
Yeah.
great thing.
Well, and I know this was my second time watching this one, and I I understand your initial whiplash because yes, it all out of nowhere becomes this courtroom drama, which but it's never overly serious.
No,
And I
yeah,
think that's what makes it work.
hmm,
Because I think there is still a charm. And like even like district attorney guy, like he fumbles around. The judge is like hamming it up.
yeah.
And all of these kinds of things, I think, really work for the film and makes that part of the film still feel fun and magical. And it's a very, very I'm watching a movie kind of moment. But with the mail, I
Oh
think it
yes.
works so perfect in this
In
movie.
in the moment, it works so,
Yeah,
so well in that scene, like with the judge, because I feel like what this movie does really, what it did really well was you can tell the judge really like at first like he wants to just like throw it like yeah of course he's guilty, and then the advisor is like, well, do you want to jail Santa Claus? And then like
yeah.
and then you
And he's
see
like,
that like yeah, and it's like like basically how he says you cannot win either way. You need to be really on the because you want to be up for
yeah,
re-election, right? And if you tell him, if you send him to jail, you're gonna be the judge who sent Santa Claus for to jail. You don't win, and you can tell in every scene after how the judge is not sure. He's just looking for those
Yeah.
loopholes, for the leeways to get something right, something where he would
Yeah.
be seen
Yes.
favorably.
And that's a fun aspect of this
Yeah.
film, and I feel like helps continue this effective tone to the film. Because this is a charming and sweet movie. It's really well shot. Like this is some
Hmm.
crisp black and white,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
gorgeous looking film. And it just has that tone of you would watch this during the holidays. And I think the sincerity of it really
Hmm.
works for its favor. And that's probably my bit. Well, not to get jump into the next film yet, but I
Yeah.
just feel like this story works. I think it's interesting, like they don't turn public
Hmm.
opinion against Kris Kringle. It's
No.
all just it's the system versus Santa,
Yes.
and it's the cynicism versus Santa, and that's what I appreciated about this film. And it moves well. It's like relatively lean. It's only an hour and 36-minute movie
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
And it moves, it's well structured, it's well paced, it has good humor, it has good emotion to it. I just this is the kind of film that you just watch and you're just like you have a little smirk on your face at the end and like that was adorable. I enjoyed watching this movie.
Correct. Like pretty much everything besides the courtroom drama. And again, I have a sneaky suspicion, watching the remake and knowing myself, if I were to rewatch it next year for Christmas, I might love it even more. You touched on it already, but Maureen O'Hara, I think what her bond with Natalie Wood, with her child in the movie, it's so believable and it's
Yes.
so earnest how she turns around on the idea because she is the like logical, like we
Yep.
will not, I'll not raise my daughter with lies, with fairy tales, with fantasy, because it doesn't benefit anybody. And then you can slowly see her turning, where in a lesser movie, wink wink, that character might be unlikable, but Maureen O'Hara, what she does with that character,
Hmm.
you are rooting for her, even though you don't necessarily agree with, like, I'm a, I'm a believer in, if you have kids, don't lie to your kids, except for kind of few magical
Except
lies
for
like
Santa.
that. Not like I've always been saying, they only have so much naivete, and there's always like only so much magic before it gets ruined with reality. Let's not do that, right? And and I that's what I appreciate about her character and the bond she had with Natalie Wood. And yeah, it's charming movie. It's a great movie. I actually am keen to rewatch it next year and see where I stand on it next year, because I think I'll probably love it.
I do think I did watch this for the first time last year. So I had that feeling and I really enjoyed this a lot, even
Hmm.
more the second time. And yes, the dynamic between Doris and Susan is so important to the film. And
Oh yeah,
also, Maureen O'Hara is such a key piece to this because Chris is trying to convince her,
yeah.
and that's his success. That's his measure of success, and that's our measure of success because this is who we care about in the film.
Because
And
realistically, she is us. She is the
yes.
audience. And I
Mhm.
think that's what the remake failed on. Like, she is the audience. We are slowly turning with Chris and seeing Edmund being Santa.
Yeah.
Right, and like, so when she believes, we believe why she, and we see why she believes, and we also believe because that dude is so fucking cute, and like, you want to be him,
Mm.
you want him to be Santa. I was so happy when I read he won an Oscar for this. To this day, the only actor ever to win an Oscar for, or even be nominated, if I'm not mistaken, for playing Santa Claus.
Yeah. And the
Like,
dynamic between O'Hara and Payne, I enjoy. Like it's simple, but like I appreciate how they come together as that gap between them
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
closes and just builds to that.
Yeah.
And now let's talk about a movie that basically didn't do any of those things very well, which so this is from 1994.
Yep.
This is director Les Mayfield. and starring Richard Attenborough as Kris
Uh-huh.
Kringle, Elizabeth Perkins as Doris, Dylan McDermott as our like
Beefcake.
Joe type, um, JT Walsh as the prosecutor, and Robert Prosky as the judge, and then Mara Wilson,
Of course, I was waiting for that.
who
Yep.
who was so famous at that point, being a child actor, and then a whole entire other set of
Yep.
plot point that just but before I dive into any of this, Luke, what were your thoughts?
So I still think it's a decent movie. I don't think it failed on all fronts. What I think, or what I'll say is this: with the pedigree it had, especially behind the camera, not in front of it. If you look at the director's other credits, like Encino Man, like Blue Streak, those
Yep.
silly, over-the-top comedies, I think this was the best they could have done. It could have been much worse.
And
But yeah,
Flubber.
yes. Oh, Flub. I only seen once or twice when I was very little, so I would have to
Oh no,
rewatch it.
I'm just like, who thought this was a good idea?
Well, I know some people, Foster, loves Flubber, so I'm
Oh
not
no,
gonna shit on it.
I haven't watched Flubber in probably 25 years.
That's what I'm
Um,
saying. Yeah.
but like, whose idea was it to get a director like this to do this movie? Like, if you look at his overall filmography, it is gives no indication that
hmm
he can make a sincere holiday movie. And also, that's I think probably the problem. But I'll let you continue, Luke.
Well, I was just gonna say that basically. So with that pedigree, like in front of camera, great.
Yeah,
Behind the camera, I think this is the best this could have been with that. It could have been also saying that it could have been much worse. So I'll give the movie props for that. It still has some genuine sweet moments. Yet again, moment, but this time the girl is not Dutch. She is deaf, and that
yep.
was a nice moment. Obviously, Richard Attenborough, even though he doesn't reach the peaks of Edmund, I like Richard Attenborough. Sue me.
Yeah.
But even him, like I wasn't 100% on board with. Well, we can get to it in a second. But I think it's a bit of a downgrade, but I would still say it's a fine movie to watch. And I understand that's the one of those movies. If you've seen when you were growing up, you will probably have a very big nostalgia goggles for it, which is fine. Which is,
Yep.
and at the end of the day, there are some movies that are objectively not great, but it's a Christmas movie. You watched it ever since you were a kid, so you will continue with it. You know. What did you
So
think?
so my comparison that I thought in my head is Gwyn is the Richard Harris Dumbledore of Santas. And Richard Attenborough is the Michael Gambon Dumbledore of Santas. And I think it's one I Richard Attenborough is a great actor
Yep.
and a talented director.
Yes.
I would have been interesting if he directed this, to be
Oh,
honest.
imagine that.
I kind of wish he well, I don't kind of wish, I wish he did
That'd be
this
fucking
movie.
cool, actually.
But I think he does a great job with his performance. I
hmm
don't buy the type of Santa we're getting as much. I because he does go off the handle. He
hmm
does get overly emotional and angry, and I'm like, I I guess for this version of the movie, it
hmm
works better. But this might be one of those situations like I just don't like this version of the movie. Like the idea of it.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie is more cynical.
Yes.
I feel like this movie is colder.
hmm
Like visually, it has a very specific aesthetic it's going for. And I
I've
think
noticed
it's
they like
really,
lightning as well, like how they shoot their faces. They have like a halo kind of almost, and it was a
yeah,
purposeful choice. I've noticed that when I was watching, I was like, oh, that's a very weird lighting. Okay, cool.
which they accomplish exactly what they're doing,
Yes.
but it didn't work for me. I felt like this film feels colder. than the original. And that, I guess the struggle for me is, and I'm really trying, well, I'm basically just comparing this to the original, but I feel like original only works so well because it is sincere and warm and charming. And I feel like this just feels like a modern 90s cynical version of Miracle on 34th Street. And like they have the diplomatic immunity
Yes.
guy from Lethal Weapon 2 as this big evil toy company man.
Mm-hmm.
And you have like James Raymer and who was the other actor? Jane Levy's, the two of them who are just like these goons who are like
Yep.
going around trying to sabotage Santa. I like that whole entire sequence, like that whole entire subplot just did
Mm-hmm.
not work for me. And it made this too ridiculous for me and just took me out of the movie. I'm like, and it's also like at least 20 something minutes longer than the
It's almost
original.
2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like without 5 minutes, it's like a 2 hour movie. Yes.
And it's just like all of these extra things that you added aren't benefiting this story. And at least it didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that overall, like, I think it's still at the end of the day an effective movie. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
But when you compare this to an all-time classic like Miracle on 34th Street, that really captures the spirit of the holiday. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think this movie captures the spirit of the holiday as much. There are moments like
Mm-hmm.
the scene with the little girl with the sign language, like I really felt that.
Yeah.
But, like so many of the characters, like uh Perkins feels cold
That was I was gonna
in
mention that as
this.
well. No, but
Like,
I'll say this, right? I think the biggest difference between the original and this one, the original believes in itself and in the message.
mhm,
This one believes in the original. It feels like it doesn't believe in itself, and that's why we get many scene by scene remakes, line
mhm,
by line, readings. They were in the original. But coming back to your point with the mom, what's the actress's name? Elizabeth Perkins. Yeah,
yes.
I made a point on my Letterboxd review for this one. Even
Mhm,
though this movie is 20 minutes longer, she gets. I think she gets like a less screen time because of everything else that goes
yeah.
around, and because of that, that character that was kind of our, you know, us, substitute for us as an audience, gets lost, and the few moments she has, like refusing this nice guy when he's proposing, like she feels bitchy and cold. Not It's not about the actress. I don't think it's her fault.
No.
Just to
I
make it clear, it's the screenplay. I genuinely believe because again, it like in the original Maureen O'Hara, because they played the same character, right?
yes.
But she actually gets the time to actually establish herself. She gets the time establish her relationship not only with her child, with Natalie Wood, but also with the other like the regular Joe. She's ended up gonna end up marrying. This one spends more time on the corporate stuff. This one spends more time on Dylan McDermott because obviously he was so hot in the 90s, and
Yeah.
he's a hunk of a man. So I understand, but but it's on her account or on her character's account, so we don't have that kind of, the movie doesn't let us in a way, right? And I also think Richard Attenborough, as much as I love him as a performer and a director, I think he is a bit too self-aware what he's supposed to be. In the original movie, it just literally felt like we somehow got a Santa on a screen.
Yeah. Mhm.
This one felt like, oh, I need to be Santa. Santa should be doing this. Therefore, it's almost like you see the cogs in his head turning as he's acting, right? And that takes you out just took me out just a tiny bit. And I think that's, like when you said it feels cold, I think that that's why it feels colder, because the mom character doesn't work in this movie, in this version for me. Mara Wilson though, is she like the top three cutest and most capable of children actors you've ever had?
I think sh I think she's incredible. She's
Yes.
endearing. She's adorable. I did not like Susan that
Really?
much in this movie. They made her like the second they introduce her and she starts talking like a full-blown adult and
Hmm.
not feeling like a child,
Yeah.
I took me out of the movie.
I like the fact that they address it early on. Like, like the Dylan McDermott has a line, it's like, "Oh, are you 80-year-old child with a mind of 64-year-old woman?" Or there was like some joke about that, right?
Yeah,
And
they made a
then
joke about it, but that still doesn't make up
I
for the
know.
fact that it feels so weird.
I think that's kind of the reverse of the mom role for me, because I could see this being so annoying and grating. But somehow Mara Wilson, with her cuteness and actual ability to act, that gets underestimated. She sold it for me. So as much as the mom Elizabeth Perkins role didn't work in this one for me, I would dare to say she worked maybe tiny bit more than Natalie Wood. I know that's a probably psychologist thing to say, but like there was just some like the genuineness, like like through her you understand that Elizabeth Perkins is still the same character as Maureen O'Hara was, right? But it's the only thing. So like she kind of, like when she has the big moment with the envelope with the $1, in God We Trust moment, which I was
Mhm.
like, is that how we get? Okay, that was weird, but I guess Santa, Jesus,
That
cool.
did
God, it's the same argument. I get it. Like it is
that did
the
not work. Like I was sitting watching
I
this
know.
movie and I'm like, I was waiting for the male moment, which I
Yeah,
guess wasn't gonna work as well, I guess in the early 90s, I
yeah,
guess. But like where it's all about the setup. They
yes.
set the stage for that male moment to feel charming and fun in that courtroom moment. This courtroom sequence is overly serious, like
Yes.
really like super serious. And I I think JT Walsh is a talented actor. I don't think he was the right choice to be the prosecutor because he is like dead serious.
Mm-hmm.
And you never like it sets the whole entire sequence up to be this overly serious thing that I don't think could have stuck the landing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like I don't know what would have been a satisfying argument in this movie for it to really
That's the
stick the landing for me.
Yeah, that's the thing, like because like you see the bunch of like the ad in the newspaper before, and then you see the crowd of people. So I thought, okay, will the crowd somehow rush to the courtroom and that will convince the judge, or like will he see like a
And that
news?
wouldn't have fit in this overly serious
Yes.
courtroom sequence either. And I think tonally this is unfortunately this movie is too serious
Hmm.
and not sincere enough. And I feel like that's what's not working. And what's crazy to me is John Hughes wrote this.
That was my next point actually. Like I got
What?
in such a nice mood when I saw John Hughes production. I was like, "Oh, cool." And I then it kind of hit me. I'm like, "Yeah, this is a like 90s remake of a classic, but set in a 90s tone. It almost tries to replicate this Home Alone
Yeah,
magic, right?
but it's
But
not the same story.
correct, because where
Yeah.
it fails, Home Alone wasn't a remake of a movies from 40s, 50s. So there's first of all, there's no comparison, and second of all, it was with the characters that live in 90s already,
Yeah.
right? And here you have the fine line between making them too naive and making them actually hopeful, right? And
Mhm.
this movie just, I think the moments and the scenes are better. The elements are better than the overall picture. I would describe this movie as. It's like there are some scenes where you're like, oh, that's cute. Richard
Mhm.
Attenborough, for me, Mara Wilson. I can even make a case for Dylan being short shrifted, and but hey,
He got like
uh,
nothing to work with in this
that's the
movie.
thing, right? Like, and but yeah, but it just bogs down itself in like this corporate espionage and like buying of stocks and like buying it cheaply. The reason,
This
for
feels like
example,
a corporate movie.
yes,
That's
and
what it reeks of.
the reason it's Kohl's and not Macy's, do you know? Because in original, obviously, it's Macy's. Now it's here and it's Kohl's. Do you know why?
His money.
No, because Macy's apparently said the original is great. We don't see how this can be improved, so we're fine. Don't use our name on in the remake, please. So they took calls,
I
and
don't blame him, to be
fair.
honest.
In a retrospect, good choice.
It it was just you said you watched this back to back. I watched it Saturday, Sunday. So basically like back to back days.
Yeah,
Don't do that, people.
no,
If you're gonna watch this one, watch it before the original or some other time nowhere near the original. Because I think you're just gonna wind up being disappointed.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
for sure. I blame the writing, which makes me sad because it's John Hughes, and it's just like, what? But
Same.
hey, not all sensibilities are going to work in every situation, and I think what you brought up about Home Alone is a perfect reason why this movie doesn't work as well.
Hmm.
But that is indeed a double dose of Miracle on 34th Street for you. But Luke, thank you so much for coming on and chatting some Christmas movies.
Anytime.
And thank all of you listening. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this episode. What's your favorite Christmas movie? Is it the Santa Claus? Ho 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 ho. Make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. We have plenty of great content over on the SPDM Crew podcasting network. Luke's great interview show, where you can listen to my wife get interviewed, which apparently is a very popular episode.
It is.
And you can listen to all of our shows about movies and television and music and sports and physical media and comics and all kinds of things. And if you like our logo, make sure to check out HiFlyer Creative. And if your needs, check them out. But most importantly, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting the Wasteland Retrospective here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network.